Good day and welcome to the QEM Heroes webinar series. I'm Christine Wood and I serve as the Assistant Program Director for the Heroes Fellows Program at QEM. For more than 30 years, QEM has been a national catalyst for STEM education transformation and research capacity building. Currently, the QEM network serves nearly 900 colleges and universities and reaches more than 8,000 individuals nationwide. This webinar is part of the HEROES initiative. The HEROES program brings together former federal scientists to lend their expertise and support to the STEM research and education communities. Our fellows are here to provide tools and tips for navigating the funding landscape, developing STEM programs and partnerships, and improving talent retention in in-demand fields. We hope this series promotes engagement with our HEROES fellows and provides valuable resources to our participants. The webinar recordings and slides will be available in the QEM Resource Hub. By attending this webinar, you will soon be added to the QEM network and granted access to the Resource Hub. So look out for an email inviting you. And I'm happy to introduce our Heroes Fellow today. Dr. Joseph Isaac has spent the past 20 years as a STEM educator, ambassador, and connector among underrepresented populations and communities, both domestically and globally. His experience includes previous roles at the National Science Foundation, the Albert Einstein Distinguished Educator Fellowship, Education Development Center, District of Columbia Public Schools, and Howard University. And so, without further ado, I'll turn the floor over to Dr. Isaac. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. I will jump right in. Let me share screen. Let's move this over here. Oh, don't do this. Oh, okay, I froze for a second. Sorry about that. All right, let's share screen. Okay, I hope everyone can see the. Yes, all right. Okay, once again, um, thank you, Dr. Wood, for that introduction. My name is Dr. Joseph Isaac, and I'm here to talk to you a few minutes about STEM teaching and learning in informal and non-formal contexts. And I need to preface that by saying I have I have had a toe dipped in all three of these, formal, informal, and non-formal. And so we'll discuss similarities and differences, and hopefully everybody will understand when this is done that everybody has a little bit of informal in them and non-formal as well, and what the difference is. So I wanted to start off by, and I'm hoping I did this correctly. I wanted to start off by doing a quick word cloud, and the question is, think about this: where did you first become excited about science? And I gave some example answers, but you can, if it was something else, then uh, uh, please please put it in. Was it a classroom, a museum? Was it a parent, grandparent, a guardian? Was it a science fair? Was it a television program, a hobby, something else? So if you use this QR code, you should be able to access. Oh, okay, cool. It's working. All right, cool. So you should be able to access the Menti and then just put in your answer and let's see what we come up with. So I'll give you about everybody about 30 seconds and then we'll see what we're looking like. Experience as an artist. Give it just a few more seconds. Okay. All right. So what's interesting about these answers Yeah, good. So what we have here is we have of examples of formal education, informal education, and non-formal education. So I actually like these answers. I'm liking that someone put PBS, exploring outside, experience as an artist, high school lab, middle school, elementary school, growing up. I like that. All right. Thank you very much for your participation. All right, so today, our learning objectives, because every educator worth his salt has to put learning objectives on the board. So by the end of this webinar, I'm hoping that the participants will be able to distinguish between formal, informal, and non-formal STEM learning, understand how opportunity gaps shape STEM participation and lead to achievement gaps, examine the role of informal and non-formal STEM environments, explore research-based strategies on broadening STEM participation, and identify practical applications for your own contexts. All right, so first of all, let's get the definitions out of the way. So understanding STEM learning ecosystem. So we'll start off with formal STEM education. What is formal STEM education? Formal STEM education is pretty much what you probably think formal STEM education is. This is done in a structured way. It's usually school, K through 12 and beyond. The curricula are usually structured. It's standards based, graded assessments, institutional settings, and but who wants to be stuck in an institution? Um, Examples: K through 12 schools, colleges, universities. And I did a scenario for each one. So the scenario for this was I went to school today and learned about space exploration, right? So come home from school, parent says, "Hey, what'd you learn?" "Oh, I went to school today and I learned about space exploration." Right. Now, the next one we're looking at what is informal STEM education. All right. So some of the characteristics for informal learning is it's voluntary, right? It is learner driven, it's interest based, very flexible, very experiential, right? So examples being science museums, zoos, aquariums, citizen science, and science media, like someone had mentioned PBS, right? And so the scenario with that would be I've been really interested in space travel. So after school, I went to the library to find more information on it. Now, no one forced that student to go to the library. That student went on their own volition because they had an interest, a true interest in it. And so that's what separates informal STEM education from formal. This is totally voluntary. Like I'm going out after this webinar. If it's not still raining, I'm going out on a walk in Rock Creek Park. Why? Because I like to be around nature. But that's my decision, right? Informal STEM education. And then the last one is called non-formal STEM education. So after I talk about these three, I'm going to talk about how people get the last two mixed up all the time. All right. So non-formal characteristics are that they're organized but flexible. They do have structured learning goals. They usually have sort of time limits placed on certain things. They are outside the formal school systems and they're usually voluntary as well. And I say usually voluntary because I have run some camps where the kids' parents have signed them up and they didn't want to be there, but they made them go. And so examples being after school programs, summer STEM camps, robotics clubs, 4-H, community STEM activities. And the scenario for that would be this summer, I enrolled in space camp where we learned about space exploration from real NASA scientists. We even met an astronaut, right? And so you see the difference using the scenarios between formal, informal, and non-formal STEM education. And then I like to use this sort of so when you're looking at it as a continuum, right? Non-formal usually is the bridge between formal and informal, right? And so informal is you just on your own. I'm picking up a science book because I want to learn more about this on my own. Formal is Miss McGillicuddy is making me do this assignment for homework. Non-formal is like, I'm interested in this, and I want to pay some money to go to this museum program that's going to have me doing some type of structured activity in what interests me. Okay. So this is where I found out something interesting, right? During when I was doing my dissertation research, I found out that uh, people, and when I say people, I mean just about everybody, still, even in the educational research space, a lot of people misuse the terms non-formal and informal, or shall I say, they use them interchangeably when they're not actually. And even now, when I get to the slide where I have resources for you, a lot of those sites say informal, but they're actually non-formal because a lot of those activities are structured. A lot of those camps they're talking about are non-formal STEM education camps. All right. So just something to know that even today, people misuse those two terms. All right. So then in looking at it in totality, right, because learning happens across interconnected systems, we look at this STEM learning ecosystem. And I wish the picture was larger because the font is kind of small, but you see museums, you see parks and gardens, libraries, school, which is your former school, online media, work, business, government, community, and then in the middle you have family, friends, and neighbors. And so, truly holistic STEM learning happens with all three types: formal, non-formal, and informal, engaged in the ecosystem. Like you can't have a truly holistic STEM or learning experience without the three types working together some way, somehow. All right. And so then we move to section two. So section two looks at the achievement gap and the opportunity gap, right? And I go back, there's this, I can't even remember what one of the online universities and the president, it was a commercial and he said, what the world evenly distributes is talent. What it doesn't equally distribute is opportunity. And that sort of resonates with me as an educator, of mostly students of color. That resonated with me. And so I see that a lot. All right. So we have to rethink this achievement gap. And instead of asking why aren't students achieving, the better question is what opportunities have students been given to achieve? All right. And so, with doing that, we look at this systemic, multi-dimensional approach of leadership, of family and community groups, pretty much like that the previous slide's ecosystem picture. Um, and that representation matters, and you're going to see a lot of themes that a lot of this should be like old hat to most people. Representation matters: identity, belonging, attitude, perceptions. Um, and then how systemic gatekeeping keeps us from keeps these opportunity gaps alive and well, and how these opportunity gaps lead to achievement gaps. And so what exactly is an opportunity gap, right? So if we're looking at in the literature, the opportunity gap framework is an educational and sociological model that shifts the focus from achievement gaps, which are like disparities in test scores, to unequal access to the resources and experiences necessary for student access. So emphasizing that potential and talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not, what I had just said before. And so opportunity gaps include unequal access to several things. Could be advanced coursework, could be STEM enrichment, could be qualified teachers, laboratory experiences, technology, mentors, professional networks, right? And so once again, when we talk about educational equity, we end up using the same dog whistle terms over and over again because it's all related, pretty much. And so achievement gaps are often symptoms of opportunity gaps. And so when we're looking at these gaps in these barriers, they didn't pop up overnight. They have been historical, and they still plague us as a society to this day in terms of reaching that true sort of goal of equity. All right. And so, what are some of these historical and structural barriers? And this is where we almost get away from STEM itself and start. Oh, shoot. Hold on. And start talking about. Did I just lose my feed? Okay, sorry. Can you guys still see the screen? Oh, screen sharing has stopped. Hold on. Sorry about that. Something fell onto my keyboard and just messed everything up. So screen. All right, so I'm pulling it back up right now. You should be seeing it in a minute. And here we go. Okay, all right. So back to this. So the historical and structural barriers, like I said, most people have seen these before. Most people know about this. I'm preaching to the choir here. Unequal school funding, property tax disparity, and then we can go to residential and housing segregation, redlining and zoning laws, the digital divide, generational wealth and economic divides, healthcare and environmental inequities, policy, underrepresentation. And one thing I started doing in my science education courses is I started going early in the semester. I draw on the board Maslow's hierarchy of needs because and I constantly remind my students to go back to that. If those base needs aren't being met, this is, these are contributing factors as to why students may or may not be performing in the classroom. And so these are human needs, right? Feeling safe and feeling accepted and not being afraid to take chances, these things. And so a lot of these have a lot of these play into those historical and structural barriers that we see. Okay, so once again, another preaching to the choir moment, but why representation matters. And I always look at, I do believe this specific graph is probably a few years old now, maybe about 5, 6, 7 years old. But it still applies, right? When we're looking at science and education occupations juxtaposed against the actual U.S. population. We see disparities here. We see for the Hispanic and Latinx communities who comprise 18.5% of the population of the U.S. They hold only 7.5% of the science and engineering occupations. Similarly, with the Black or African American population, is 13.4% and 5.6%. So we all see this. Um, and I always like to encourage the use of these sort of these analytical graphics to hammer points home. All right. So now we getting into why informal and non-formal STEM matter. Okay. Why? Like, who cares? So I'll tell you why. Because where the gaps in formal education exist, informal and non-formal STEM education can fill in those gaps. Okay. And, hands-on learning, real-world applications, low risk exploration, cultural relevance. We'll get into that in a minute, and positive and affirming STEM experiences. Okay. And these spaces are designed in that way so they can often meet learners where they are, not saying, oh, you don't know this, blah blah blah, this, but to actually bring learners along at a pace that is conducive for actual learning and retaining of information. And then, the proof has been in the pudding. We've seen where that type of these types of interventions have positive ramifications in the formal school sector. All right, so something I firmly believe in, building STEM identity and self-efficacy, right? So seeing if you can't see yourself as something, then you're less likely to be that something. All right. Seeing oneself as a STEM person. And I use STEM person kind of jokingly because usually when you see things like that is seeing oneself as a scientist or an engineer or a mathematician. So I just call it a STEM person, just trying to umbrella that term. Um, and so, looking at this learning framework, which is the model of science identity, um, and this intersectional model was developed originally from a study of successful women of color to understand how they navigated systemic and cultural barriers in science, right? And so you see STEM identity, excuse me, and the three nodes that come off of it as competence, performance, and recognition. Okay. And so when environments recognize broader ranges of performances and competencies, more underrepresented students can build a positive STEM identity. All of this is just makes complete sense. All right. Now, how do they connect? Like how, so if you know anything about me, I like to use graphics and feedback loops and all that good stuff. I'm really good with that. So STEM identity and self-efficacy share a reciprocal, mutually reinforcing relationship, right? So um, and if we're looking at this, we can see that high self-efficacy in STEM subjects allows one to engage more deeply, um, leading to success that then builds STEM identity, right? So there's that relationship there. Conversely, a solid STEM identity boosts your confidence to tackle difficult, problems you may come up with. And then persistence and career intent and bridging the gap and all of these. So these are um, all ways in which STEM identity and STEM self-efficacy intersect with each other. Okay. And so how do we get marginalized populations to to feed into this, to have buy-in? And this is where we come to culturally responsive STEM education, right? Which is an offshoot of the framework of culturally relevant pedagogy by Dr. Gloria Ladson Billings at University of Wisconsin-Madison. And she happens to be an education hero of mine, heroine. So I really her work is quite fascinating and important. If you have never heard of her, please look at some of her things. But so she looks at three pillars, the three pillars of academic success, cultural competence, and critical consciousness as being the tripod in which culturally responsive or culturally relevant pedagogy stands. Okay. And so what does that look like instructionally, right? Because we can use these terms, but in terms of like in the classroom, what does that look like? Collaborative group work, um, project and problem-based learning, design thinking, diverse representation, uh, what I like to call, um, I just drew a blank. My goodness. Uh, 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 oh, um, indigenous learning systems. All right. Um, these real world issues that bring a, a relevance to a student's learned experience. I never, I'll give you an example. I was never a good physics student until I learned. learned about the physics of rocketry, or the physics of a roller coaster, or the physics of kicking a ball or flying a plane. Just physics in itself in the vacuum was too abstract for me. But once you started putting it into the visions of things that interest me, I was all in. All right. Same difference here. All right, so like, what does the research say? All right, I'm a big proponent for uh, um, looking at the actual research literature and seeing what that says, the peer-reviewed literature that's out there. And so, um, research findings, and this is once again, I'm going to keep saying this. Um, a lot of this is common sense, right? Inclusion is good. Diversity is good. Um, and so what we find in the research is that stronger STEM identity builds self-efficacy and positive self-identity. Like, once again, preaching to the choir here, but a lot of people they don't realize this. Real world application begets relevant connections. Okay. Bridging equity and inclusion shrinks achievement gaps. You know, a deepened career awareness. It only makes sense that you're increasing the employment pool for these STEM careers. All right. Low risk trial and error reduces pressure and fear of failure. And a kid is more likely to just be and be comfortable and then really um, really exercise their creativity when the stakes are off. Like there are times for high stakes. I get it, I really do. But that's one of the things that I love about informal and non-formal is you can just be. You can learn for the love of learning. All right. Not for fear that I'm going to fail this standardized test and my career options are shot from then on in there. That's pressure, right? And then lastly, critical skill development, okay, which can't be underestimated, right? I'm talking about those soft skills, critical thinking, creativity, what I just said, adaptability, perseverance, empathy, which we do not have enough of in this world right now, and emotional intelligence. All right. All of these things are in the research when we look at what the positives non-formal and informal STEM education can provide. Okay. All right. So when I bantered this back and forth, and I was like, okay, I should give several examples. But what I figured I was going to do is I'll give one really exemplar example, and then I'll give you some resources as to where you can find other examples, right? And so, shameless plug, I wanted to talk about um, this entity, this company, this foundation that really got my feet wet into non-formal STEM education, and that's Heritage STEM Camps, right? And so, um, full disclosure, I did my dissertation research on my experiences and the data I collected from running these STEM camps. And so right now, Heritage STEM Camps Foundation runs two camp locations, one in UNC Chapel Hill and another in Johannesburg, South Africa. Not actually really Johannesburg. It's in a probably about 30 kilometers north of Johannesburg in a place called Mulder's Drift. It's and there's a tented camp area, and that's where we would have these STEM camps. And these camps are 7 days, sleep away, like parents come drop you off and they go. And then they come back a week later and they pick you up, transformed. And they are unisex, right? So the first week, so if you like I did, if you were to teach in these camps or to run these camps, you're there for 2 weeks because the first week is all girls and the second week is all boys, right? 7 days apiece. And so in in these camps, we would expose children to just a multitude of STEM activities. All right, all using project and problem-based learning, design learning, engineering, medical entrepreneurship. What I loved about my experience with HSC was the fact that we we were structured, but we also knew when to wing it a little bit. And the kids really like they really came away with a deeper foundational interest in STEM careers as a result of what we were able to do. I'll give you a couple of examples. So we were um, limited but not excluded to not excluding we we were robotics and drone based a couple of years. So um, we were using these Edison robot platforms to teach kids coding and programming. And then with that, we would have them do business pitches on what building prototypes and how these prototypes would would become ventures and helping their communities. And once you give children this sort of this foundation and you let them run with it, they really can make up some really amazing things, and which is what we found out. And so like I said, they have two locations. The U.S. location is down in North Carolina, and the international location is in South Africa. And so I just wanted to then share with you a few pictures of some of our experiences and what the kids were able to do. And so, obviously the South African camp was just an amazing life altering experience for me as an educator as well as the kids itself. And we did. I'm gonna go back and show something real quick. So looking at the pillars of how we built this camp, we call it the Taylor Educational Framework. STEM academics, leadership, and discovery, STEM through play. And so then I'll go back to the pictures and then you can see where those fit in. And so so STEM academics are, that's self-explanatory in terms of us teaching the children how to code, teaching them how to they build and fly drones. We had some DNA research going on, some medical equipment use and familiarity going on. It was just an amazing experience, but intertwined with all of that good STEM stuff was other STEM stuff. It was outdoor. Like we took hikes, we had obstacle courses. Um, we took field trips to the cradle of humankind, which wasn't that far from our site, in which some of the earliest hominid fossils in the fossil record were found. And so you once again, if I had a chance, I would go back to that holistic sort of STEM ecosystem, and what that was able to accomplish was just really sort of bringing this full picture of what avenues STEM can take you, and how non-formal and informal STEM education differs and can be a complement to your formal learning. Because what we came away with was pretty much every kid that experienced that, they're like, oh, I'm ready to go back to school now and take this science class. I'm ready to show my teacher what I learned. I'm ready to talk to my classmates about how cool this stuff is because I had this experience, because I saw firsthand what STEM can look like holistically, right? And that was through this non-formal STEM education opportunity. And so then here, these are what I did is I tried not to instead of looking at individual successful programs, what I tried to do is I tried to give you a collection of 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 sites that list several programs themselves. So with each of these sites, what is informal STEM education, NSF's AZL program, the NICE program, K's program, all of these through national academies, like all of these sites and resources list out uh, several exemplars, as opposed to me just listing out exemplars here. I'm giving you sites with that describe several exemplars each. All right, so then lastly in this section, when we look at informal and non-formal STEM and career pathways, like so, a lot of people will ask, well, school is how you prepare, is how you prepare your students for STEM jobs and career trajectories. And yes, that is true, but it's not limited to that. So using informal and non-formal to sustain and cultivate STEM career interest is something that if you're not doing, then you're wasting a grandiose opportunity. Um, And so, once again, looking at these designated institutions such as science centers and planetariums and, zoos and such, but they offer these structured and voluntary exhibition and lab opportunities, which will then, go very far into building job specific expertise. Maker spaces. Can't say enough about maker spaces. And then what they now call tinkering labs. All right. These are just spaces that once again, these low risk opportunities and areas where students can just be and learn and with the pressure off and have their creativity flow. And then obviously citizen science, which I completely adore. So I you look at that and you come up with this pipeline of exposure. All right, exposure first, then exposure begets interest begets to use biblical term, begets interest, begets identity, and then identity brings into persistence, and then persistence is career interests, career readiness. All right, and this is what informal and non-formal STEM education can do for career readiness and career trajectory. All right, so how do we build these equitable STEM futures, right? So I have a list of recommendations. One side is for educators, the other side is for organizations, sort of a larger group. So for educators, build partnerships, right? And we've had a couple of webinars that focused on that partnership building. Leverage community assets, focus on community justice, integrate cultural wealth. I cannot stress that one enough. Deconstruct Eurocentric narratives. There are other ways to look at things. Utilize place-based learning. Place-based learning is a powerful tool in terms of tying in that familiarity with a student's educational experience. And then lastly, affirm student identities and dismantle stereotypes. And then so for organizations, you look at expand accessibility, all right, center those most impacted, right? And I'm not saying exclude others, but those who need it the most, you center that, all right? Diversify your programming. And unfortunately, we've seen a lot of that go away in the last couple of years. Um, uh, uh, Develop structured mentoring opportunities. All right. Foster safe spaces and growth mindsets and establish culturally responsive practices. So if you see on both sides, on the educator side and the organizational side, we're looking at cultural responsiveness as an important indicator. All right. And so the question I can ask you is, what is one opportunity gap that you can help close in your community or slash sphere of influence? Right. And so that's not something for you to answer here. That's something for you to take away and really ruminate and think about it. Like, hey, where do I fit in? Get in where you fit in. Where do I fit in with this, with being a value add in shrinking opportunity gaps? Because you shrink opportunity gaps, you then shrink, it leads to shrinking achievement gaps. So think about that. Give that some thought over the weekend while you're watching World Cup. And so my key takeaways for this is STEM learning can and does happen everywhere. Remember this: before you ever step foot in a kindergarten classroom or pre-K classroom as a little kid, you were a scientist. As a child, you were trying, why does this happen, mommy? What is this, daddy? What is this? Ooh, look at that truck, look at that plane. This fascinates me, blah, blah, blah. Every kid is every kid is an inquiry-based scientist. And then for some reason it sort of just leaves. But STEM learning can and does happen everywhere. Opportunity gaps often precede achievement gaps, which is what has been, we've talked about ad nauseum today. Informal and non-formal STEM environments expand access. STEM identity and belonging matter, and partnerships strengthen STEM ecosystems. All right. Remember, go back to that sort of web of ecosystem there. A web is a lot stronger than one singular strand. Okay. And with that, I want to open up question and answer. Thank you very much for your time. Um, I do have references, and then I'll go back to, uh, of course, my computer just froze. Jesus. Can anybody hear me?
I can hear you
Man.
just fine, Dr. Isaac.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I'm back. I'm back. All right, cool. Just references real quick, and then the events page. And you can find the QEM events page, the Heroes web page, and the workshop feedback form here. Um, should I leave it on this page while we open it up for questions, or go back?
I do recommend leaving this up so people have an
Okay.
opportunity, and I'll just give a quick plug. Our QR code to our QEM events page has an opportunity for you to sign up for future webinars. Our Heroes webpage is a way you can connect to our Heroes Fellows. If you need to seek out a Heroes Fellow for grant development, for instance, or just want to make a connection, these are former federal scientists with deep knowledge of STEM ecosystems and STEM learning. And our workshop feedback form, which I'll also link in the chat. And we have plenty of time for questions today. There was one that came through earlier from Taryn Green. The question is, what about opportunity gaps in doctoral programs?
Ooh, so I'm 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 chuckling because I'm thinking about my own personal experience. Um, and so I'm assuming we're asking, do opportunity gaps exist in doctoral programs? And the answer is absolutely. And what you'll find is the same rules apply, right? When you're looking at gaps in opportunity, it's almost as, especially in a doctoral program. Think about this. It's almost as if when you're in a doctoral program, it's great to have things sort of provided to you and laid out to you by the university. And with when you find out these gaps, it's almost up to you to to do something about it yourself, to be your own best advocate. Um, and then to exploit those opportunity gaps for your betterment so you can finish the program obviously, but in terms of doctoral programs, you see opportunity gaps especially for students of color and underrepresented populations. I once again I experienced that myself in my doctoral program. You can ask, you can, yeah, the the subconscious biases that happen just about every day, the microaggressions, um all of these contribute to this opportunity gap that exists, because opportunity gaps have a lot to do with comfort level, right? And so if you are in a situation where you don't feel supported, um, you don't feel reaffirmed, you're going to be less likely to seek out, these opportunities that might be a value add to your educational experience.
And Taryn Green raised their hand, so I'm going to allow Taryn to speak to ask a question live.
Sure.
Taryn, you can come off mute.
Hi, Taryn.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and well.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, first of all, Dr. Isaac. It's a great presentation. And so I am the person who raised the question about the opportunity gaps in doctoral programs, and I definitely agree with your response. I just wanted to add, I am a doctoral student, and I just think in this context or in this environment that it's easier to kind of explain away the opportunity gaps as like academic discretion, right? Because doctoral programs are inherently differentiated for each student. It is a personalized experience, but I think sometimes personalization and differentiated, trajectory or academic experience can unfortunately sometimes be used as pretext for denial of opportunity. And so, yeah, in a graduate program, I think it just that environment lends itself more to the risk of um, sort of disguising these
Mm.
opportunity gaps. I mean, that's just my opinion. I wonder if what your stance would be on that.
No, that I I think the way you worded that was actually very accurate. And it's funny because yesterday was my actual 4-year anniversary of defending my dissertation. So a lot of this stuff has sort of been placed out of my mind, a lot of these experiences, and then what you just said sort of brought a lot of this back. I'm like, oh yeah, 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 what I found really helpful and useful was, in this journey you find your community, and that you find, and that use that community as your support system, knowing that there are other knowing that you're not alone, is super important, and knowing that there are others who are going through similar experiences, because then that's when you can bounce ideas and solutions off of each other. But yeah, what I agree wholeheartedly with what you just said.
You, Taryn. We have a couple of other questions to get to. First, from B. Kelly, where should a new educator start in building those connections? Should they just head on to the nearest church and bust out the chemistry set?
You know what? The first place I would tell you to start off with is is finding out what where your sort of like your niche passion is, what interests you the most, and then you're like, oh, okay. So I'll give you a perfect example, right? I'm not a birder, but I know birders, right? And so you're a teacher, right? You know, that's your, yeah, it's your passion. You do that on the side, and you go on birding trips, and you know, that's where you want to find your informal and non-formal sort of education, your STEM education projects and for for your students is because that passion that you have for whatever is gonna show. Kids are very observant, and they pick up on those types of excitements and emotions from their teachers, and like, oh, Miss McGillicuddy really loves birds, so I love birds. So yeah, I would start there. And then, like I said, when you get this when you get the slide deck, those links that I put in that slide, they all if you go onto those links, they will. There's a lot of stuff out there. One of the things I tell my students in my education, my science education courses is, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like, there's stuff out there. You can reinvent the wheel if you want to, and when you get comfortable with the wheels that are out there, then you can reinvent one. But don't start off. Start off with what's out there, and join a community in something that you're very passionate about.
And another question in the Q&A. I think I was interested in science by watching PBS. Me too. What are effective ways for this current generation to cultivate their interest in science? Also, colleagues have partnered with their churches and faith communities for STEM programming. How do you see this as part of the ecosystem?
So PBS, man, like I'm a child of PBS, and I'm thankful that it hasn't been taken away yet, because it such a large part of my sort of development. Um, growing up in the late '70s, early mid '80s, you know, it was it, your local PBS station was always a font of cool knowledge, and it was always that cool factor of, oh, I'm learning watching TV. See, mom, I don't have to have the TV off all the time. I can learn. But you know what's cool in this day and age is, we have this tool, that the double-edged sword of the internet, man. You can find anything for good or for bad. And what I really in PBS Online is a great resource, but also YouTube. Um, I call it YouTube University. Like, you can, like, the educational content that's out there right now is really great. I mean, you could simply type in informal, non-formal STEM education, and I mean, it's a wealth of information. As for churches, and it's funny you should say that. We have time. Yep. So it's funny you should say that. When I when I was doing my PhD program at Texas Tech, we would have in-person summer sessions. So we would, the cohorts would all fly into Lubbock, and we'd get together. And so the first time we did that as a cohort, I met who would be my sort of summer roommate throughout the program. And he introduced himself. He's like, "Hey, my name's Todd. I'm the church camp guy." That was literally how he introduced himself. And so he was like really my sort of first exposure to non-formal STEM education through a faith-based lens. And he was telling me what his camps were doing in Texas, through the church. They were funded by the church, but they were super STEM, super sciencey, and I really I thought it was I thought it was very novel and sort of innovative, what they were doing. If the church and the science world have long had an adversarial relationship, throughout history, and so whenever you can get a chance to I remember as a high school teacher when I was teaching high school biology and I taught evolution, man, I had parents like it was like old old clips of Frankenstein when the people are storming the gates of the castle with torches and everything because I yeah, so it was so whenever you get a chance to sort of bridge that gap between the two, and it's always it can always only be a positive.
Okay, we have a few questions, but only a few minutes, so we'll take one more question and we'll go in order in which they appeared. From your camp groups, Chapel Hill and South Africa participants, what are the similarities and differences you acknowledge as challenges to their interest in STEM programs?
And let me tell you something. I'm an international STEM guy, and what I have learned through my travels is kids are the same everywhere. It's so funny when you actually travel in an educational context and see and talk to teachers and talk to students and parents in like Thailand and in Zambia and South Africa and Jamaica. The kids are the same everywhere. Like you almost got to trick them into learning and this, that, and the fourth. And so what the only difference that I found between those kids in South Africa and the kids in North Carolina was access. Um, the kids in the United States had a lot more access to things at their fingertips, and whereas the kids in South Africa, depending on where they went to school, there's a big disparity gap in South Africa with between the private schools and the government schools, and so depending on where they went to school, their access was very varied, if that makes sense.
And I think we have one more question, time for one more question, and it's from Jacqueline Roebuck Sacco. Hello, Jacqueline. I remember you from our ATE workshop. How do you understand reality pedagogy as posited by Dr. Chris Emden as it relates to informal learning spaces for STEM and community leaders alongside students?
So you know what I fancy myself? I fancy myself as a lifelong learner. So I need to learn about reality pedagogy. Because I can't say that I'm familiar enough with that term to be able to speak on it with any type of, if I tried to, I'd just be blowing smoke. So let me look at reality pedagogy. It sounds like something I would be interested in, because I am a firm believer of when you teach real world applications, then like it once again this goes back to my whole physics in a vacuum, looking at formulas as opposed to seeing how a plane takes off. Like when you put things in real world applications, I think you get more buy-in. And so I will promise I'm looking at what's it called, what
Re Reality pedagogy.
reality pedagogy. I'm writing it down. I'm gonna check that out because I like to learn new things.
Well, in the interest of stopping on the hour and letting people get to their next meetings, I wanted to thank everyone for attending today. This was a really informative, passionate, and lovely talk by Dr. Isaac, and we love to see the audience participation. And Dr. Isaac does have his email up, so if you want to continue these conversations, I don't think he'd mind if that you
I
emailed
love
him.
it. Please do. Feel
This is
free.
his wheelhouse, as he indicated to
It
me.
is my
Clear,
wheelhouse.
clear from this presentation that it is. So, with that, I will let everyone go and say have a wonderful Thursday. Thank you so much for attending our webinar today. We
Thank you
will
very
see you
much.
at a future webinar.